So, the next phase that we want to get into now, after we've done this pose test, remember I'm going to play this through, that we're just hitting those main poses through the course of the scene. The big thing that's missing now is that dialogue. So we've got our basic, broad actions laid out. Now it's time to smooth it out and add those mouth shapes. So let's get into that. I want to talk about dialogue just a little bit before we get into it. The thing about dialogue, there's a couple of things. Some of the mistakes that I see where younger animators are having a hard time with lip sync. One of the first mistakes they'll make is they'll try to make every shape for every letter that's in the word, and that's not how we talk. So it's very imperative that you don't think about the letters that you're going to be animating. You want to think about the sounds that you're going to be animating. Don't think about the letters, think about the sounds. And so as we listen to this first phrase,
Listen.
take it off mute.
Listen to me, mister.
Listen to me, mister.
Listen to me, mister.
You can see I've added some mouth shapes. One of the things I've done is I've already gone in and I've added all these mouth shapes into that pose test, and so I want to take you through and break it down for you and show you what I was thinking. So I want you to listen to this dialogue.
Listen to me, mister.
Okay? Listen to me, mister. It's not going to be listen to me, mister. Your mouth is going to pop all over the place if you do that. One of the things that I always use as an example is if you can hit your accents and you can hit your open and closed, just those things. If you can hit the parts that are accented, that are big, and you can hit your open and closes, you're 90% there. And one great example is if you watch Sesame Street or The Muppets, and all they are open and closed mouths, but they hit those open mouths and closed mouths at the right time, and you're getting lip sync, basically. I mean, you feel like those characters are talking. So if you can get there, then the rest of it is just kind of finessing, okay? So let's listen to this. And the other thing too, and I want to jump into the timeline here on the dialogue track on TV Paint. One of the great things about this software is that it's very easy, first of all, to lay in the dialogue track. I simply click on load sound, I find the file that I want, I click on that, and it automatically loads to my timeline. And then I can go in and I can slide it anywhere I want. So it's very, very convenient that way. The other great thing about it is that it creates a little waveform right here. You can see, it looks like a heartbeat where the sound hits. So I can see, you can actually see where the accents are. Where she comes up and says, listen to me, mister. The biggest sound she's hitting is listen. Listen to me, mister. And then it all kind of comes down from there. Well, you can see that on the wave. See that? Listen to me, mister. And then everything comes down. And you can also see her consonants. Listen, there's a hard S there. And then there's a hard T. It's right there. You can see it show up. And then she says mister. And so there's a little bit more of an accent on mister. So that's really cool. You can kind of see right on the timeline or on the dialogue track where you need to hit some big sounds and big shapes and hit them hard. The other very cool thing that TV Paint does is, I'm going to go back actually a little bit. Back when I was animating through the late 80s and through the 90s, the way we used to animate for hand-drawn animation to do dialogue was the first phase to get dialogue to the animator was that dialogue track was brought through editorial, and we would have exposure sheets. There are these vertical sheets that had all the frames laid out vertically. And there was a column on the left side that had dialogue. And so there was a dialogue reader in the editorial department that would go through and listen to these waveforms, just like I was showing you, but then they would go in and they would write phonetically. They would write the word itself on the frames on the left side. And so I would know, like on listen, I would know that the L would hit on frame 43. And the I in listen would hit on frame 44, or that sort of thing. And they would write it all out. The very, very cool thing that TV Paint does is they provide you an area to do that. So it's kind of cool. I went ahead of time, and I kind of laid it out in the same way that we used to get it. So if you listen to this,
Listen to me, mister.
listen to me,
Listen to me,
mister.
mister.
Now watch this. I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to stretch this out a little bit. And you can see where I wrote, listen to me, mister. And if I run over that,
Listen to me, mister.
see that?
Listen to me, mister.
So if you choose to, you could go through and you could write out phonetically all the way through, and you can see the mouth shapes, the letters that you're supposed to hit in those particular frames. So that's kind of cool. I've kind of adapted. I've kind of gone with the waveform. I kind of like it. It's just a choice. You can go either way you want, but I just wanted to show that to you. It's a lot of fun. It's pretty neat. And it's a little bit of Disney history too, so it's kind of cool. There's another thing I want to talk about in animating dialogue. When you animate dialogue, we tend to form our mouth shapes before we actually make the sound, especially if we're anticipating a sound or if we're going to hit a sound hard. And even as I'm talking to you and I'm explaining this, if I say, I'm going to hit it. I'm going to hit it, I'm going to hit the dialogue hard. When I raise my arms up, you'll see I open my mouth to say I'm probably about 8 frames before I would actually say it. And so these are things that over time we've kind of learned and we incorporate into our animation. And so that even when our character is in the middle of talking, listen to me, mister, I mostly hit the dialogue 1 frame to 2 frames ahead of making the sound, or if the dialogue is really fast, I'll hit it right on the sound. Never, ever, ever hit the dialogue late, obviously, because it's going to feel out of sync. But you can hit it ahead, because we actually tend to see people talking and we register what they're saying before we hear it also. So we tend to see the mouth shapes first. And so I've hit dialogue, especially in big anticipating mouth shapes, big accents. I've hit dialogue even 10 and 12 frames ahead and hitting that mouth shape first before it comes out, and it looks right on. It plays right. Okay? So let's get in here now.
Listen to me, mister.
So what I've done, I'm going to jump back to the pose test really quick.
Listen to me, mister.
So you can see I've got a big space in here.
Listen to me, mister.
There's just one drawing holding out, for this whole thing, and then she settles in. So what I need to do is I got to go from this drawing into this drawing, and in that gap, I've got to deliver all that dialogue. So what I start to do is I start to break it down. I start to add in-betweens, in between here and here. And what I do is I start to break it down evenly. And remember we were talking about slow ins and slow outs in our fundamentals? Well, here I'm going to have a slow in. I'm going to go from here to here, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a drawing in between these two. Let me turn on our light table. So if I were to add a drawing in between, I would throw in, I'll just sketch real quick, the head. And I'm just gonna show you the shape. I'm not gonna do the full drawing right now. But we would throw in something that would move up like that. That's the halfway mark. And then for the slow in, I'm going to add another drawing. And so that's what constitutes a slow in. Each drawing is getting closer and closer and closer to that final pose. Okay, it's slowing into that pose. And as I create those drawings, as I'm doing each in between, getting tighter and tighter and tighter, I am looking at the mouth shape on where it falls on that timeline. So let's say, here she comes, she's coming up. Listen. So I know as she comes up, I want her to anticipate that L sound. So here I've started in betweening, but let me play this. If I play this through, you can see how it gets slower and slower as it gets closer to that pose. That's because I've gone half, 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 going in towards that pose. You see that? It just goes nice and slow. And so as I've created those drawings, I've created the mouth shapes. You see how she starts to open her mouth right here before she actually even says anything. So she's starting to, in my mind, she's got her tongue and her mouth shaped like an L. And so she's going to that and there's the open mouth. Listen. There's that and all I'm doing right in here is I'm hitting my dialogue keys too. I'm hitting those hard consonants. I'm not worrying about all the in-betweens that go in between to smooth out the dialogue. This is that next phase. We're going from the pose test to hitting the dialogue keys, and that's what I'm doing here. Now this is a big point right here. Remember I was talking about not emphasizing every single letter in the word. And this is a good point right here where she says, "Listen to me, mister." She doesn't say listen to. She doesn't open her mouth twice. It's just listen to me, listen to. See how I just open and I go and it slides right into to. Watch. So we go listen. It just goes listen. We don't open our mouth again. To. And then and we go from the to the M in me. Now, when we say listen to me, mister, we do have to go out mama, me, listen to me, mister. So you want to make sure that we hit an open mouth and a closed mouth again. And then when we say mister, we don't go mister, we just say mister. So it's a M shape and it goes right into an R shape. See that? And then it relaxes. So I just want to reiterate, when animating dialogue, it's not about hitting every single mouth shape. That's the key. It takes a while to understand it, to really get a feel for it. You really have to listen to that dialogue and say it to yourself. Once again, I'm going to say this over and over again. Put yourself in the character. So as you're acting out the scene and feeling it and delivering the line in the same way that the character is delivering the line, then you can start to feel how that dialogue is delivered. And then you can start to lay it in on the timeline, the mouth shapes, the way they should fall. Let me come over here real quick. So I want to show you how I hit some of these dialogue, or some of these anticipations. Remember I was saying at the beginning of a piece of dialogue, or when you're emphasizing something, you can hit the mouth shape ahead of time. Well, here I have her coming forward, and I have her hitting that mouth shape for your ahead of time. Watch. See? She's not saying anything yet. But she's hitting that mouth shape because she's getting ready to say it. Because she's going to go your, and then it's going to go right into an M shape. There's the M shape. Night. Now, once again, you're my night in. There's not a big open. There's not a big N. You're my night in. I don't do that. You're my night in. So it's a very subtle open to the mouth. And then it just goes right into an N shape. You see that? You're my night in. Big anticipation. And she starts to open her mouth for shining. Shining. And then it just settles. Shining armor. This is another good thing, another good example. Katharine Hepburn has kind of this New England accent to her. So she's not saying, "You're my knight in shining armor," and making a sound. It's more of a British thing. "You're my knight in shining armor," is what she's saying. And so I'm making sure that I'm listening to that and I'm animating what I'm hearing, and I'm not animating it the way I say it. I'm animating it the way she's saying it. And if you watch the dialogue, you see that? Amma. So I'm going to let that play through.
Listen to me, mister. You're my knight in shining armor.
And when you can break down the dialogue that way, where you can listen to the way the actor is delivering it, and you're animating what you're hearing and not what you're thinking, as far as the way you would say it, that's when you start hitting good lip sync. You hit your dialogue ahead on the accents, and you animate what you hear and not what you think. Animate, not the way you would say it, but what you're hearing. When you can pull all that together, that's when you're going to get really great lip sync. I'm going to let it play through again.
Listen to me, mister. You're my knight in shining armor. Don't you forget it.
So let's jump ahead to the next phrase real quick.
Don't you forget it.
It's very quiet. Don't you forget it. So I'm holding back on some of the mouth shapes. There's nothing that's going to be really big, wide open mouth. She's not screaming it. Don't you? Don't you? And this is interesting too. We got two different words, don't you, but the mouth shapes are similar. So we just stay in that mouth shape. Now, don't, that's an accent. So I want to hit that a little bit harder, but then we ease out of it into the chew, don't you? And watch how she moves her mouth. See, I was able to do that just in two drawings. Don't you? But you can see here, I start to anticipate it right in here. I'm already hitting that mouth shape before she says it. There's the F. We got to hit that. You always got to hit your Fs. Don't you forget it. Once again, I'm animating through. Don't you forget it. Forget. She's not going forget. She's just going forget. So it's forget. So it's just a F. Forget. Just three drawings, three shapes, and then it. It's very, very subtle. It actually has very, very little movement in the dialogue. Let's play it through.
Listen to me, mister. You're my knight in shining armor. Don't you forget it. You're going to get back on that horse.
So, you're going to get back on that horse. I'm not going to keep going through the dialogue because I think you've got the idea, but I do want to show you something on get back on that horse. Because the other thing I'm covering in here is smoothing out the action, smoothing out the acting itself. So when she comes up, you're going to get back on that horse. Remember, I want to hit that dialogue, not just the dialogue, but I want to hit that pose, but I want to hit it nice and gracefully and smooth. So what have I added? I've added that slow in, just like we talked about in our fundamentals. I'm putting a slow in into that, and then I'm going to slow out of it. So watch when she hits that pose. It slows into the pose, and then it slows out of it and moves into the next pose where she comes forward. Watch.
Listen to me, mister.
Slow in here.
You're my knight in shining armor.
Slow in. Slow in.
You're going to get back
Slow in.
on that horse.
And she slows out of it and moves into the next pose. So almost every single pose that I create will have a slow into it and a slow out. And it's just the amount and how long you hold poses are what gives it its kind of its fluidity and its grace and its timing. You don't want everything to be really even. Let me just scrub through that again so you can see it. You can, when I play through this, you'll see slow ins and slow outs all through the scene. You know, there's a slow in there. And then we're slowing into there. Another slow in. Another slow in. Slow out, slow in.
And I'm going to be
Slowing
right
out there,
behind you.
slowing in there,
Tight. And away we're going to go, go, go.
and another slow in. So you can see it's all over the place. I want to do one more thing. I showed this in the fundamentals, but I want to show it now that we're kind of focusing on this. I want to bring up that original pose test. Let's, I just want to show you how far we've come. But by being able to, let me bring this down a little bit. By being able, there we go. I'm just going to bring that up a little bit. We started this whole thing out by creating this. There we go. We started this whole thing out by just thumbnailing and laying those thumbnails out on the timeline, and that being our initial guide. I want to show you, we've come a long way since then, but if I play this, you're going to see the thumbnails and the actual animation really kind of line up. And that's what the point I want to make is if you start with that very basic roadmap and stick to it, by the end you'll end up with a very, very tight, kind of beautiful scene.
Listen to me.
You can see those thumbnails. Actually, let me bring that up just a little bit better. Here we go. Play that again.
Listen to me, mister. You're my knight in shining armor.
You can see where we're acting within a pose.
You're going to get back on that horse. And I'm going to be right behind you, holding on tight. And away we're going to go, go, go.
One more time. So you can see, I'm going to mute it as I go through this. You can see that we've defined we've defined where we want our character to be, and by utilizing that, making sure that we stick to that and working within these poses, it gives us a framework. It gives us kind of a fence to work within. That way we're not going all over the place. This is what gives your animation life, and it keeps it under control. And so, let me go ahead and stop that. And so, for me, once we hit this phase, when I get all the dialogue in like so,
Listen to
and
me.
we've hit all these keys like this, this is usually when I was actually an animator, not a director, but when I was animating for a production. Once I'd get to this point, then it would be time for me to take it to a director, and I would show the director. And it's at this point that where the director would, either have notes or not. So now, if I got this approved, which I probably would because I like it, then it would be time to go in and in-between the whole thing. And those in-betweens are what's going to smooth out the action. And in this beginning part here, you can see I've actually started to in-between it. Now for me, a scene like this, because it's slow action, I could get the whole thing down to 2s. Now 2s mean I'm holding one drawing for every 2 frames, which means I would have, and because this is 24 frames per second, I would have 12 drawings for every second. And so that's how it would play out through the entire scene. The whole scene is 501 frames. So we'd end up with 250 drawings in this scene for 20 seconds. And if I scrub through here, you can see that I've added the in-betweens in this little section, and it's on 2s. And one of the great things about animating on 2s is it's the human eye. It can't really. We see nice smooth action at 24 frames per second, but we can also do 12 frames per second, and there's a slight little jitteriness to it. But we kind of accept it. It still feels smooth to us. When we start hitting 3 frames, 3 frames per drawing or 4 frames per drawing, then it starts getting choppy. But when we animate 2 frames per drawing, it still feels smooth to us. So we're able to get away with doing less drawings, basically is what I'm trying to say. So when I scrub through, you can see there's a smoothness there. So that's how I approach this scene. In animating dialogue, the most important thing, there's 2 things that I feel are really important, is animating ahead, making sure that with big sounds, when you want to emphasize a piece of dialogue, listen to it, and you're going to find that you hit those mouth shapes before we actually say them or hear them. That's important. The other thing that's even more important, I believe, is not over-animating every little sound that you hear. It's very important to not think about the words that are being said and animating the E's and the Oo's and the Ah's and the T's and all that stuff, but animate the sounds that you're hearing. That's what you want to do. That's what's going to give you great lip sync. And we're going to have a supplemental, we've got a whole bunch of supplemental parts to this entire course that we're creating. And I've got a whole little section on how to animate dialogue in there where I'm going to get into a lot of detail. So make sure that you don't hit every single sound. Listen to the sound and animate that. With that, you'll have great dialogue. Let's move on.